This is Conspirinormal.
All right, guys, welcome back to Conspirinormal. We've been talking for about 30 minutes, but hopefully you guys will never hear what we just talked about. But
we got all the secrets of UFOs,
all the secrets of the UFOs, and the paranormal
revealed.
No, it was all in that 30 minutes. You guys just missed it. But this between us in this secret society. But tonight we've got two people that were part of the film that just came out, I believe, about a month ago, called Tear in the Sky. And we've got return guest Dave Altman, who's been on the show before. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Anytime.
You're a big supporter of Conspirinormal, and we always love having you. And David Mason, who was the one of the tech guys on the show.
The tech guy.
Hey, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, David, for coming on.
And if you've seen the movie, then you've seen some of these various devices that David Mason has pioneered.
But first, what I want to get into, I always like to kind of start just kind of like a personal level with both of you gentlemen. And Dave has been on the show first, so David, we'll start with you. What got you interested into the subject of UFOs, UAP, whatever the nomenclature is that we're talking about? Into
the fascinating, the mysterious.
Yep.
I'm of that generation of In Search Of and all the books on.
Same here.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, my parents got divorced, and my mom and I went to live with my grandmother, and she was a librarian. So after school, my mom would have her job, and I'd go to the library, and my grandmother would sit me down into the monsters section of all the Universal monster books on Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman. And, once I tore through those, the next shelf over was UFOs and Bigfoot and all that good stuff. And it hasn't stopped since.
Yeah, same here for me. We were just talking about on another episode where I mentioned being in the library and seeing the Man, Myth, and Magic series. And that's
right.
It was kind of one of those books that like really kind of like a freaky cover and like had some freaky shit in it. But I remember, being utterly fascinated by it too. So yeah.
There were a couple of books that scared the hell out of me, and I never wanted to open them again. That's for sure. When I was that age,
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Same here. David Mason, what about yourself?
My interest developed at about age 13. I was checking out books in the library about UFOs, and you kind of did that in secret. You didn't want to share it with your friends because they thought you were crazy. And my mother subscribed to a UFO magazine, and I really dived deep into that magazine. And eventually I built, at age 13, a UFO detector, which was a compass that comprised of a phototransistor and a LED, so that what this detector did is if the compass deviated from magnetic north, it would trigger an alarm, a sonic alarm, so that you knew something caused it to alarm and go outside and look in the skies and see, what you have. And so that was one device. And when I was 17, I built the photodiode binoculars that were shown in the movie, and they convert light that's modulating or fluctuating intensity and turns it into sound. And then it also has a built-in defocused low-power laser, so that in the event, if an object in the sky is sending a signal to us, we can beam it right back to them in the form of this defocused laser in an effort to communicate with them. And so if they're sending out data, we're probably not going to understand it. It's going to go over our heads. It probably won't make any sense to us. But if we just beam it back to them, it'll be slightly delayed, and it'll show that we are making an effort to communicate. So that's that one device at age 17 is what I put together. And my discoveries of anomalous objects with FLIR happened in 2005 accidentally. I wasn't intending to go outside and look for UFOs with a thermal camera. I used a lab standard camera I had in my test lab that we had paid $70,000 for, and this camera, which I'd use for engineering and troubleshooting and those kinds of things in electronics, I decided, I'm going to take it home and maybe it might be applicable in astrophotography. I'm going to see if I can get the long wave infrared to work with the optics, but of course I couldn't get the efficiency. And so I was left with, well, I'll just point it in the sky. I've got commercial jets flying overhead. It'll look kind of cool, just to see what that looked like. And it was still daylight when two very large objects appeared in the camera. And I looked at the monitor and I looked straight up, and I had better than 20/20 vision, and I looked up and there was absolutely nothing in the sky. And it just shocked me. I did utter the acronym WTF when that moment happened. And then I tracked these objects, and according to the camera's calibrated temperature span, which is it's a gradient scale that shows temperatures based on the image contrast, so you can, or shade, you can compare it to that calibrated temperature span, and both objects measured -30 Fahrenheit in temperature. So I thought that was very strange, and they made no sound. And that's really what got me started using thermal cameras, and specialized thermal cameras, not just any thermal cameras, but cameras that could range into very cold temperatures and quantify these cold objects. And I still don't know what they are. I just know they're not our technology, because I've recorded thousands of hours of birds, bugs, and conventional aircraft. I know how they look and how they appear in the thermal camera, and they always register much, much hotter than these anomalous objects.
So you saw these two little points of light that you could not see with the naked eye.
Yeah, these were one was a large boomerang, one was a V, and so the shapes were when I look at the video, they have occupied about 5 degrees of field of view, which is the equivalent of, if you're looking at the moon and imagine you were to string the width of the moon, that would be about 10 moons width. So you'd have to be really blind not to be able to, to miss them. And so anybody should have been able to see that. It would be like looking at the width of your hand with your fingers spread wide at arm's length. You would definitely see those objects.
That'd be like the size of like a Phoenix Lights kind of thing.
Yeah, it's something like that. And it was just strange. They were just going eastward, and one was in front of the other, and they weren't bird flocks, because I know what bird flocks look like, and these looked very mechanical and just very cold, and they were invisible to the naked eye. And I've also, on some occasions where I'm using the thermal cameras at night, where two cameras will pick up an object, and then I take out the Gen 3 night vision, which if you've ever used that, really nothing can hide from that. And they were not visible in the Gen 3 night vision. So it was like wavelengths were being blocked by whatever it is I'm recording, because like your visual wavelengths are going to be like 350 nanometer to about 850 nanometer, give or take 50 nanometers. And then your night vision technology, like on image intensifier type, will stop. It'll go down to about 1,000 to 1,100 nanometer wavelengths. But the long wave infrared, where I'm detecting these objects, is between the 13,000 to 14,000 nanometer wavelength, much, much longer wavelengths that are far out of our visible spectrum or even conventional IR technology. And, it's anyone's guess as to what these things are. And I've done a lot of scientific analysis on the FLIR, because it doesn't matter if you were to assume the emissivity of the object. This has to do with whether the object is shiny or flat black. It'll affect how the camera will measure that temperature. And if you were to say that the object was very shiny, like a bright aluminum piece in the sky, and let's say it's up at a very high altitude and it's cold in that environment, it's still going to be reflecting the temperature of the Earth's crust back to the camera. And so that's how you can say that, it can't be that. It can't be something shiny metallic. So then if you say, well, maybe it's flat black, of course we think like Project Aircraft. The problem with that, for it to indicate those super cold temperatures, that means that the object has to be at very high altitudes, upward of like 90,000 feet when we get down to -80 Fahrenheit. And the problem with that then is the scale of the object becomes very large. There was one video that I was working with William Puckett from UFOs and W. He's a meteorologist, retired meteorologist, and he looked at one of my videos, and I showed him the temperature scale, and he said, well, that's at 90,000 feet. And I just applied some trigonometry to the camera aspect ratio and the apparent field of view of the object, or measured. And according to the calculations, it was 2,200 feet across if this object was indeed at that altitude. So no, that's not our technology. Yeah, and so either way you slice it, whether the emissivity is an object that's shiny or flat black, there is no way of proving that it can exist in that kind of form. So it just deepens the mystery.
When you see these things, you get the impression that they are completely solid, or do they seem amorphous? Like, do you see the same type of object, or do you see different things at different times?
That's a good question. I get some that do appear to be shape-shifting, others that look very solid and non-shape-shifting. I get cylinders are very common. I get certainly the V formations. I've had solid triangles where they're just a triangle mass, and very cold triangle. I've gotten a couple objects that they look like sky serpents. I don't know how to describe it. They look like they were undulating in the sky, like a snake, but they didn't, they didn't show a head or anything. Oh, and they were extremely cold, like about -70 Fahrenheit. And it doesn't make sense unless if that was some form of a living gas, that was just raising the background temperature. So to explain the cold temperatures, when you take a thermal camera that has cold temperature capability and you point it toward a clear sky, you'll get a temperature read back that isn't your ambient temperature. So it can be 80 degrees outside, Fahrenheit, and then you have a clear night sky, and you point a thermal camera, you might get a reading back that's about -40, -50. And the reason for that is outer space is near absolute zero, but the Earth's atmosphere has some mass to it, and it has a low emissivity, but it has some mass. So you're getting a sum of the Earth's atmosphere against that absolute zero sky, and you'll come up with this nominal temperature that really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just a summation of the atmosphere against the night sky. And then within that cold atmosphere is where I record anomalous objects. And, every time a commercial jet flies by, when I've got the camera spanning in those cold temperatures, it's just off the scale in temperature. It's white hot. And, and of course, it's a jet. And then I've got one video of a trifoil object, or it looks like, the equivalent of a clover leaf. It doesn't have a stem, but imagine three objects close, dangled together. And they're moving across the sky, and I think they were about -60 Fahrenheit, and they were following a commercial jet. And I picked it up on 2 thermal cameras. And I thought that was rather extraordinary. That was on September 30th, 2019, when that happened. And I don't know what these things are. I know what they're not. I know there's people that will try to look at them and give prosaic explanations, and I've heard some of these prosaic explanations, but they demonstrate they do not understand thermography or FLIR. And whenever I hear the comments, because they immediately don't account for the temperatures. And that's a real problem in this field, is you've got people debunking things through proclamations and not real science, as well as supporting things where they don't apply science to a video that really needs to be vetted properly.
Yeah, I think people usually, in the study of UFOs and the phenomenon have been really focused on just the visual aspect, but you're taking, this different data. And I think that's real important to think about the stuff differently.
Yeah, it is a different data points, and there's other cameras that'll work well. Like if you're using cameras that'll track satellites, the thermal cameras won't pick up the satellites because they're too small to trigger the microbolometer cells. Unless you're using an extreme magnification lens, you could get the ISS, or the International Space Station. And so there's events that'll happen in the sky that the thermal camera won't detect, and then of course the thermal camera will detect others. So you really need to combine different technologies and for different tools and to get different data sets.
Are these things that you see on the FLIR? Are these like always in the same area where you're based out of, or have you gotten?
I've tried it in different locations, and I get the same kinds of results. So because I thought, that it must be my backyard, must be the hot spot, and I didn't want to I didn't want to advertise that because I didn't want people camping in my yard and crapping in the yard or something, So I experimented. I went to some other residences and set up and got it. In fact, when William Puckett was living in Bellevue, I set up the camera at his property, and we recorded a triangular object, and so I know it happens. And I've gone up and north of here in Baker Lake area. There's phenomenon going on, and I really believe it's just worldwide, that it's not really that you have to find certain UFO hotspots. There's probably that exists, but I'm sure anybody's backyard or front yard will yield this phenomenon.
I think so as well. Another point that you made, because these things are registering so cold, like really extreme cold. One of the points that's made in the movie, Terror in the Sky, that there are a couple of things that we could possibly mistake UFOs for, like they had the drone, and one was the X something aircraft. But if you saw one of those and you thermal camera, you would know that it would just be white hot. Yeah, it's inescapable. And then there would be, its trajectory would give it away. Right. And it's like where I've reported things. I live in a highly controlled airspace area. It's a residential area. I've flown a Cessna over my house when I was taking flying lessons, and I know how everything. There's airports around the area, but nobody's going to be flying Black Project aircraft within this highly controlled airspace. It wouldn't be wise, because you would have. It'd be first tracked on radar. You could have a downed craft, and you'd have some explaining to do. Yeah. Your best is going to be tested, away from public view, so you wouldn't expose it to scrutiny. Where are you located? Is it Southern California?
I'm about 8 miles east of Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
These readings coming from these devices it's a byproduct of the development of these different technologies. Like we all have heard, of course, that night vision goggles are really great to see UFOs with, but as these technologies progress, it seems like maybe we're going to start seeing or hearing, or whatever they're measuring, we're going to start seeing more of these strange phenomena coming through.
Just by the abundance of people that are buying the technology and utilizing it. And I think more and more people would accept the phenomenon if they spent more time going outside and doing their own sky watches. I mean, whether just using binoculars in a recliner chair or investing in some Gen 2 or Gen 3 night vision. And if you spend a couple clear nights observing, you're going to see phenomenon that isn't satellites or meteors. You're going to see some things that don't follow the lines of physics as we know it. And it just takes those kinds of events for people to experience that it'll change their mind if they're a skeptic. Or if they don't have a decision on it. Once you see something and experience it, you're hooked. You're going to know that it's a real phenomenon.
And you said you've been doing this since 2005
with a FLIR. Yeah.
These things.
Yeah. So, and what was funny was, the following year, 2006, I was setting up and I picked up another camera, and I wasn't getting as much activity. I mean, as far as what the level of recordings I was getting of anomalous objects. And I think it was around 2009, 2010, I got nothing. I mean, I would set up the cameras, I got the birds, bugs, and aircraft and nothing else. And I would just go through hundreds of hours of video. And I know there were a few years where I didn't do anything because I was very frustrated, because I just thought I'm going to record and get nothing, and I've got better things to do with my time. And it was in 2016 that I resumed I'm going to reapproach this and see what I get. And it was like I came late to the party. There was a lot of stuff going on. So that's when I picked up the recordings and just started to continue it and purchase more thermal cameras. And that's where I'm at now.
Yeah. And I mean, thermal cameras are like, they cost. So yeah.
Oh yeah, they do. And there's and this is one of the common misconceptions about thermal cameras, because people hear the name FLIR and they just think it's all the same stuff. Because you can buy a $300 phone app you can put on your phone and say you have FLIR, and it'll do temperature read back, not temperature, but it'll give you an image that's usable. Like you could do home inspections or look for Bigfoot with it. And then you've got these metrology grade cameras that, will be $50,000, and then they can give you a temperature read back with accuracy and give you all kinds of parameters where you can plug in your emissivity and distance and relative temperatures to get even greater accuracy, and you'll get proper frame rates. And I'm using the expensive cameras for what I do. And so there's differences on that. And then FLIR is also very confusing because there's a lot of manufacturers of the technology, and FLIR is also a brand name because there's a company that purchased a couple of thermal camera manufacturers and then rebranded them as FLIR, and then FLIR ended up innovating and being their own manufacturer and technology developer. So they've really made a name for themselves.
It's kind of like Kleenex.
Yeah, or Xerox.
Xerox, yeah.
Xerox copy, people would say, well, that was the brand. You could say photocopy. So a lot of misconceptions about the technology. People think you can see through buildings. You can't do that. You really don't see colors. It's false colors so that you can have better visual contrast of temperature differentials and those kinds of things.
Since you're in Seattle, you should team up with some of these Bigfoot hunters and see if Bigfoot shows up at like negative 70 degrees.
Well, I'm sure he's probably not that cold at that, but
he's hot.
A lot of people.
That would mean you might be dealing with somewhat similar phenomenon. I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah, I thought about doing a camera array just in a place where people have at least announced that they've seen or heard something. And I've talked to people who are credible on it, that they didn't see it, but they heard these strange sounds that weren't human. And
yeah.
So, those are things I do want to follow up on.
Well, the reason I asked the question about whether it was solid or amorphous is that we come from the kind of the school of thought that some of this with the UFOs and UAP, I think it is paranormal by definition, but maybe kind of more of a non-material type of entity.
I think it's a multitude of things. Yeah. So this is why a lot of people are confused, and I'm certainly confused as to what I'm looking at, because I really don't know. I know its physical properties,
right,
but that doesn't tell me a lot other than it's not our stuff. And of course, there's other problems in this field of paranormal and UFOs, is that there's a lot of false data out there, a lot of faked videos. I knew this was happening, when COVID broke in or came in, people were going to be sequestered at home and had nothing better to do but to write programs of fake videos. And of course, an abundance of those things came out. And I was really shocked at how many of these fake videos that were easy to be debunked were getting press and getting play airtime, and people were believing into it. And I found so many physics flaws within those videos. There's the famous one with the moon where these objects just suddenly appear around the crest of the moon and cast shadows. The shadows are in the wrong place. And then the objects get larger too quickly relative to the distance between the Earth and the moon, where they increase in size about 50%. And in actuality, if you do the calculations, the only size increase should have been about 0.2% or some really small number. So they didn't do their physics right. They did good video work. I saw another one with the moon, and it was funny because they did really excellent work, and it was a half moon phase. And there was this C-shaped object that was like a cloud, but it looked like the letter C. And it was during daylight, and the camera operator, he zooms in on the moon, and here's this object that looks mysterious. It looked real. And then he backs up, and it shows the power poles with the shadows casted. And I'm looking at the moon, I'm looking at the shadows. I'm saying, this isn't real, because the moon is showing that the sun's coming from a 10 o'clock position, but the shadows on the power poles are showing that it's coming from a 5 o'clock position. I've got, whoever did this didn't understand astronomy or understand what they were doing, but they did really good work. They just didn't understand it. They screwed up on the physics. But this is what is going on. Just a lot of these fake ones, because they want to get the clickbait for monetizing fake videos for YouTube, or just playing a hoax just for the fun of it.
Right, and that's kind of the irony with the UFO videos now, is like it's easier to believe UFO videos, say from like the 70s or the 80s, as opposed to now when you have all this technology, like all this special effects stuff is free and available to anybody that knows how to use it. And now if there's a UFO video, it could actually be real, but people are much more skeptical now because of what
it's like crying wolf.
Yeah, and most of them do it. They overdo it. They usually put too much content to it, and they make it too big. And the ones that I always laugh at, because they'll show a UFO in the distance and then it flashes and then you hear this instant explosion, and they forgot to do a time delay, because if you have something that's a mile away and it explodes, there's going to be a 5-second delay for the sound to reach the camera. And they don't have a time delay on it. So then, that's a dead giveaway. Usually they just put too much content and sensationalism into it. And often you can tell that the video was made to tell a story. And there's a difference in how a video will be rendered if you're trying to tell a story versus I happen to be pointing my camera and there was something that shows up, that you can usually see the differences. And it's unfortunate, because I'm sure there's some genuine artifacts out there or genuine UFO videos that have been taken that may have been debunked because of the abundance of the hoaxes that are out there.
Well, not only that, but there's videos, that the older generation debunked years ago, but the people that are coming in that are newer, they don't know any different, and they start putting it out again, and like, hey, that was debunked in the 90s,
Yep.
Right.
It's unfortunate.
I want to talk about the ideas for making this film, Terror in the Sky, and Dave Altman. This, I think, was partly your brainchild. What was kind of the thought process of making this film, and some of the techniques that you wanted to use in making it?
We were originally going to make this a TV series, and we were just in the beginning of talks. The contracts were there. I'm sure you guys remember, because we were talking a lot back then, and then
excited.
COVID hit. Yeah, then COVID hit, and that was it. And it just kind of went up on the shelf for a while. And to be honest, the TV thing was cool and a movie idea was cool, but we just wanted to go out there and do it. But unfortunately, without the funding, we're just a couple of guys with high hopes. So I was introduced to Caroline through a mutual friend of ours. And, she told me, that she was thinking about doing a movie and going in a different direction. She was focusing more on consciousness, and her last movie was more based on the topic of remote viewing, but she wanted to do something new and something scientific. And then she approached me, and the rest is history. Here was our opportunity to do what we've been wanting to do since day one of joining that group, is to get out there and do it. And that's pretty much how it happened. It was something that had never been done before, and she was taking a big gamble on a bunch of guys who had never actually worked together. We were pretty much all Zoom buddies.
It was kind of like a real world, like you guys all rented this place and stayed together. And
I mean, what if the guy I was with, what if he snored or something, or what if he smelled bad or something? I'm on an island with this guy. It was like Survivor for real, man. But luckily, not to mention, were we going to catch anything on video? Were we going to get any evidence? And thanks to her, she took that chance, and we were able to actually do it. And I mean, you guys saw the results. I think she really came through.
Yeah, it's a lot more visually compelling and engaging than a lot of UFO documentaries, because it's not just like interview and the historic footage. It's like, real time observation and discussion, and it's got some movement to it and urgency. So yeah, I really like that about it, especially.
Yeah, and then one thing that you don't know is when I first got onto. First of all, for those who haven't seen the movie, I'll just do a quick little visual for you. We had three different locations. Actually, there was two different locations on Catalina Island that I had. I was on two different roofs of two different hotels, and then the main team was on Laguna. And that better? Yeah, and. Then we had the mobile unit, that Osiris vehicle. So when I first got out to the island, there was a mix-up with production, and we didn't receive any gear to record anything. All we had was night vision. We had night vision, and we had the big eyes, the big binoculars, and we had our production, the camera gear. So I was out there for the first 2 or 3 nights. I forget which one. I was seeing stuff the first night. And you can see me reacting to it in the movie, but we didn't figure out that we could actually record with the iPhones, do the night vision until like the third night. So, there was a lot popping off right at the beginning. So, the first night I was out there, I knew we would be able to probably get some type of evidence. I don't know what it was, but in the same way where I know what it wasn't, whatever I saw, I know it wasn't a plane, wasn't a drone, wasn't a helicopter. I don't know what I saw. I just know what it wasn't. I could be looking at an object through the night vision and seeing like a white ball pulsating there, and then take the night vision goggles down and there's nothing there. Put them back on and it's there again. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
And then across to California proper on the other side, you guys are in Catalina, were the other part of the team with this array of David's equipment.
So everything you see on the both rooftops, with the exception of the UFO depth camera. So this was the camera on a tripod with a dome and an antenna projecting. That's owned by Carolyn Corey, and she purchased that camera system for the purpose of acquiring data. And I brought all 8 thermal cameras or FLIR cameras, all the night vision, the big binoculars, the handheld binoculars, the large telescope, which we didn't get to really feature, but you can see it in the movie. And also had the array of inventions and the spectrum analyzer and oscilloscope and radiation analyzer. There was quite a few things that I brought. And I had to monitor all that stuff and set it up and calibrate it and get everything operational and update the recorders, because we were running 8 FLIR cameras 24/7 and having to record them on the thumb drive. So it was quite a feat to do that, to keep on track with all this gear. And the inventions were quite a few. There were the photodial binoculars, which I mentioned earlier, that convert light to sound. And then I had another invention, which was shown in the movie, which is a night vision device that converts light to sound. So these are kind of cool. You look through them and you get night vision experience, and then you can hear the sound of the light that you're looking at with the night vision. And then you can run that light to that sound to headphones or to a loudspeaker or recording device, or even hook it back up to the light wave transmitter. And the third device that I had at the island, we didn't get a chance to cover it. It's a thermal camera that I re-engineered 80% of the circuitry. So this camera will take long wave infrared, it could be cold temperatures or warm temperatures, and turn it into sound. So if we have something fluctuating in temperature, we can hear it. And an example of that camera is I had it pointed at a bird flock, and I could hear the wings beating of those birds.
Wow.
Based on the temperature changes of the wings was causing a sound in the loudspeaker. And so that was one of the devices I brought that wasn't really shown in the movie. And then I also had it's seen multiple times. It's a triple spectrum light wave transmitter. And what this thing does is it broadcasts spread spectrum, AM and FM modulation of light. And it does it in ultraviolet and white spectrum and then infrared spectrum. And there's a little bit of overlap, but I'm trying to cover a broad spectrum and do it in spread spectrum form, because this is now more of the trend we're doing in RF technology, where we're not just beaming a single carrier wave, we're widening the bandwidths, and there's some advantages to that. So this device allows us to transmit light and up to 800 terahertz in frequency, and this is in the ultraviolet spectrum. And we're leapfrogging the technology of the electromagnetic spectrum, because in radio, we're talking gigahertz, and our experimental RF is going to be around 500 gigahertz. And to go up to 800 terahertz and just go to that spectrum, we're trying to make that leapfrog of technology toward whatever it is that might be out there in outer space, to say that, hey, we're here and we're trying to communicate. And then it's this lightwave transmitter. You can put music on it, you can put whatever data you want, and you can hook up the photodial binoculars to it, or the thermal camera that makes light to sound, or the night vision that makes light to sound. So whatever you're seeing or hearing, you could run it through this big power transmitter system. And the night vision also has a built-in transmitter. It's a dual laser that is defocused and dual spectrum. And so it'll do ultraviolet and red spectrum. And the thermal camera that I re-engineered also has a long wave infrared transmitter doing the same thing. It'll transmit back whatever it receives. So just trying to do some kind of first level of communication if it's ever possible. And who knows?
David's got a YouTube channel that he demonstrates a lot of his stuff on.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got some of that stuff posted, and so people can see how it works.
What's the name of the YouTube channel?
It's just my name. So
okay.
If
David
you see,
Mason?
you just say David Mason.
I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
and it's just my. I'm wearing. I was flying an airplane, and I was wearing some headsets. So if anybody sees that, that's mine. Yeah, you can check out that. I've got some astronomy night vision videos. My parrot playing my guitar, that kind of stuff. A few guitar videos that I've done, solo acoustic guitar. But it's you've got to explore and think outside of the box, and that's why I'm building these things. And I've got the engineering experience because back in the mid '80s, I worked for a ham radio product manufacturer, engineering products and ham radio equipment, and so I've really had an extensive background and just developing things from out of scratch and then putting it into either marketplace. And in my company, we do custom engineering on products or electronic test and measurement equipment when it's required. And there are a few other things I can't really mention just because of NDAs.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
David, the audience can't see you, but you do have a couple of pieces of equipment behind you. And the viewers in the back, the three. Yeah. I think you were describing that a little bit about the music waves and all. Is that part of that? Can you describe a little bit, because that you featured that kind of prominently in the film. Can you describe that a little bit, what its function is, and kind of some interesting concepts behind that?
Okay, so what I have, what you'll see in the movie is a triple spectrum light wave transmitter. And the light is what I mean by triple spectrum. There are three individual light wave transmitters. One's an infrared one where we can't really see the light, but it's infrared. The one's just full spectrum, it's white light, and then one's ultraviolet. And by splitting the three, it's like you're separating out three different radio stations, if you want to say, like broadcast stations. And you can put different information on each one of these light wave transmitters. So sort of like a radio station, you could have rock music on one channel and classical music on another, or just a DJ talking about sports on another. You could do that with this transmitter. And by separating them out, you don't have a bunch of noise or clutter going between them. But what we're doing is effectively transmitting in the electromagnetic spectrum very high frequency information, and light is high frequency relative to radio frequencies. And we can take, if we receive something from outer space, like if we're using the photodial binoculars and there's an object in the sky that's pulsing, we can receive those pulses and run them through the photodial binoculars or night vision device, and then run it to the light wave transmitter console, which was shown in the movie. And then that console will then take that energy and put it back to the light wave transmitter. So like an amplifier, is the console is more like an amplifier, and communicate just using light wave. It's kind of similar to what we do in fiber optic technology, which has been around for decades, but we're just taking it to a different scale, bigger scale, and having a different application to it.
And Dave, you guys were like kind of doing advanced spotting on the island there. It seemed like you would then direct the team on the mainland where to look based on
so the triangulation. Yeah. So what we would do was, and this wasn't really planned, you know what I mean? Like it kind of was, but not really. Props to Michael Hall, because he was the one that right away was like, let's see what's going on with this object. So like I said, the first couple of nights, I had seen some things that I couldn't explain. Not to mention, I saw something that was white. It was bigger than a beach ball, and it was about 250 feet out in front of me. And it was before it got dark. It was just getting dark. So I actually saw it. It wasn't glowing. It was like, I don't know what it was, but I saw it for a second. Then it got dark. And as soon as it got dark, we started seeing different lights. And obviously you can tell if it's a plane or whatever. So an example is like, if I'm looking at something and I'm like, hey, is this a plane? I can't really tell. We could contact the other team and they could look up online and see if there's a plane in that vicinity at that time. So for sure, one of the objects that I saw, you know, we called them up and we're like, hey, you know, we're seeing this. What do you got? And they're like, we got nothing. In other words, saying it's not a plane. There's nothing there. So we immediately called the team, told them about it. Then they were able on their side, and I'll let Dave continue in a second. You know, we gave them our the coordinates of where it was that we were looking at and so forth. We were on the island. Relayed it to that team, and then they took over on that side to try and triangulate and get their own data on whatever we were looking at. Mm-hmm. And I'll let Dave explain how they did that.
Oh, we just went back to the timestamp of what we were having, and then looking at the data that we had recovered or was analyzing at the time. And I don't remember which event Altman is referring to, but I know we had some correlative data where we had
the first one, the 9:30 event.
9:30 event. I'm trying to recall which one that did it. Was that something that correlated with FLIR or just radiation?
That was the one where it was correlate. It was, I saw it, you got, and then Kevin Knuth saw it. And then the Osiris went out, and that's when they looked with the fisheye. Okay,
and that was that the event where they had that thing in the sky, or was that the?
It was the night vision that I caught.
Okay, I don't remember what came up on FLIR right at that time. That's what I'm trying to correlate. I think I'm getting
the readings were more on radiation, mm-hmm. and I think gamma or something. I forget too.
Yeah, and I think it might have hit like 42 million or 42 million electron volts at one moment. It was a big spike over the 2 million electron volts per for nominal background. I think that's what that might have had. There were several events I know where we had these correlating spikes. I just wanted to be sure about which one I was mentioning, so I wasn't really clear on that.
Now, welcome back, everyone. And now tonight we are really going to start getting to the top of the pyramid, as they say, the capstone with the eye of the grand architect of the universe.
That's right. You got to watch out for that, Shelby.
Now, in the last transmission here, now we talked about the mysticism of the International International Association of Conspirinormalists.
They make it sound like it's a good thing, like it's an association. It ain't an association.
Well, it's an association of a bunch of dang perverts is what it is, but we'll get to that now.
Yeah, well, sex magic.
And then we talked about that social Mardi Gras society called the Mystic Crew of Conspirinormal, and how the Strange Realities Conference was put on by these elements and in fact used to promote these groups.
All right, well, tonight what we're going to do is we're going to get even further into the secrets of the strange realities, and we're going to talk about the hidden hand behind all of it. The most elected.
Oh, that's right now.
That's right. Hidden hand, man. The real insiders who pull the strings. And of course, you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about that order known as the Ancient Circle of Strange Realities. Now, it's said that members of the Mystic Crew are really getting out of hand at Strange Realities conferences. So they had to put that little revolt down, and they needed another layer of secrecy to hide their nefarious doings. But even more secret rituals and symbolisms, and that this society would be only for the most adept candidates, and for those master propagandists of conspirinormalism, what the hell is that, who have spoken at the Strange Realities Conference and done their little rituals and stuff on stage, man. You gotta have an exorcism just to get through all that.
Now, I hear that down to the last one, every single one of them who've spoken at the Strange Realities Conference, the Mystic Crew Balls, the Strange Realities monthly streaming series, which is free to our $10 patrons.
But don't do that now. No, come on.
Every last one of them is in the ancient circle of strange realities.
Of course. Of course. I mean, why would they be speaking if they weren't? And that's how the ancient society, the ancient circle of strange realities was actually created, Shelby.
Those presentations are selected as part of their agenda in the furtherance of conspiranormalism, the mystic crew, and all this nonsense. And for $20 a month, this elite of the elite, they get t-shirts, all the secret transmissions,
Yep.
entry into the mystic crew's happenings, and the monthly speaker series. And it is rumored that they get together every year at the Strange Realities Conference. And then that's where they meet their hidden masters from other worlds to receive their instructions.
Ascended beings like, that live in like Shambhala or something.
Now you see, it appears that Adam and Siphiel are at the top.
Yeah, they definitely are.
But what lies behind these grand hierarchs of these various societies that are found at patreon.com/conspiranormal?
That's right. That's right. That's where you can find it. I don't want you to go look. I don't think you should seek this stuff out. But if you're curious, I'm going to tell you right now, before the grace of God.
It's all out there.
Before the grace of God go with you, son. And, it is out there. And what you don't want to do is pay that $5 for that International Association of Conspiranormalists. Definitely don't want to pay $10 to get into the Mystic Crew, where you can get a monthly, speaker series or something or whatever they do. I don't think.
What do they do in the Mystic Crew?
They keep that secret. I don't think that's a speaker. I think there's some Babylonian fertility rites going on up in there. You definitely don't want to get some secret garment or your temple underwear, whatever hell it is you get at the ancient circle of strange realities, and that's the $20 level. You don't want to go there, guys. Don't. But if you feel like it, if you really feel like you need to, just to look, I'm gonna tell you, you are looking into the spawn of Satan. But you could go to that patreon.com/conspiranormal. But I am warning you.
But I haven't ever seen anything that was really like this mastermind put together, with all these different people, different places, and all these different technologies together, and having multiple witnesses too of the same things from different perspectives. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was fun doing it. It was a lot of work, I'll tell you. Setting that up.
Not only with the equipment wise, but I was doing research on the area for 2 years before we even got started, because I was just looking to go out there and do the expedition. And then there was the TV series that was possibly going to happen, so I really did a deep dive into that area, and I made a lot of local contacts who told me some crazy stories. A lot of fishermen captains and whaling captains see things out there all the time, and they have the same stigma as pilots, and they just don't want to talk about it. And I became friends with the editor of the Catalina Island newspaper, who actually wrote a book, which I have. Oh, I can't show it to you because I can show it to you, but the audience can't see it. Unfortunately, it's Mysterious Catalina Island. And this is an entire book written by Jim Watson about the strange sightings and everything strange. I mean, from the giants to UFOs to portals. I mean, the guy was able to write a whole book. Yeah. He actually had sent me a photocopy of the Catalina Island newspaper from the front page, along with a handwritten copy of 2 Army veterans who July 7th and 8th, 1947, photographed flying discs on the beach. And this is the same week as Roswell.
It's going to be my next question was, why did you guys pick Catalina Island? So apparently Catalina Island, there's a lot of weird stuff that's happened there, but specifically you picked it because of what
Kevin
happened.
Day and the Nimitz encounter.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that. People I'm sure are familiar with this, but why you specifically chose this, Catalina, and then on the other side, talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, 2017 is when the New York Times article came out, and along with that article were 3 videos, which was the gimbal, the go fast, and the tic tac. And the Navy was out doing maneuvers, practicing, and this was out towards Guadalupe and Catalina Island. And they picked up objects on radar, and they had visuals from the pilots as well as visuals from some of the crew. And it was a life-changing event for some of the guys that were there. And some of the guys, the retired veterans from the Navy, were on our team. And that was the whole point. Kevin Day, he's the one that put the team together originally. It was his idea. He was the founder. And he wanted to bring out to that area a team of scientists to go and actually collect data, or try and collect data on whatever it is the Navy encountered out there. And, lo and behold, that was one of the big things that kind of hooked me a little bit about the whole Nimitz encounter, because there's so much debate on whether it was ours, it was theirs, we don't know. I mean, if the story would have happened, and me, I'm a very skeptical person. If I'm not there and I don't see it, I have a hard time. So I do kind of lean towards eyewitness accounts if it matches up with maybe other stuff that's happening. Am I making sense? So you have the Nimitz encounter, and there's a lot of people that were like, oh, well, it was drones. Well, there weren't drones in 1947 when these 2 guys on the beach are photographing discs, let alone 1942 when the Battle of LA happens and the object comes down to Catalina and then goes out to the Pacific. So stuff's been going on out there for a long time. It's just always been going on, probably since before we know. Catalina, like the book says, is very mysterious. During World War II, that's where the OSS trained. OSS is the predecessor to the CIA. So you get a lot of weird stuff going on out there. Like we mentioned, the giants. There's allegedly giant skeletons buried all over that island. And trust me, every chance I got to talk to a person that's from there, a native, my first question was, where are the giants? And they would tell me the stories about, them being out there.
L.A. Marzulli talks about that a lot, the Catalina Island giants. I've heard, because he equates them with the Nephilim and all that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know what they were. I don't know if they were Nephilim or if they were tall people, but whatever. There's multiple stories. And like example is there's a guy who's born on the island and he owns a submarine. He does submarine tours, and he was been there for 50, 60 years. And I asked him, and I was like, hey, so what can you tell me about the giant skeletons? I'm like, where are they buried? He goes, just look under your feet, because they're everywhere on this island. He told me in the 30s when they were building the casino, which is up kind of on a cliff face on Catalina Island, they dug out where they were going to build the casino, and it was nothing but skeletons, nothing. And they just put the casino not on top of all of them. They got out what they could, but they're all still buried there. We're talking like 7 to 9 foot skeletons of people, whatever they are.
Yeah, and Catalina Island too. Walter Bosley, who was on not too long ago,
my good friend.
He talks about Catalina. He talks about how the Wonka Brio expedition and that they sailed around, Catalina Islands. He thinks that there was something stored on Catalina Island at one point. So
I personally think there's some type of maybe magnetic anomaly. Especially like Guadalupe, it's a hotspot for great whites. It's like where they go to mate. And, when you think of sharks and how they move and, where they go and, like it's always comes back to like something with like electromagnetic or something, so it's something's out there. I don't know what.
Yeah. It kind of like pulls them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me when I was watching this, and that this is kind of Catalina, and this makes sense with everything else that I know and everything else that I've talked about. The Catalina, that area seems to be kind of like this portal area, and you see this in places like Skinwalker Ranch. I think Rendlesham Forest is another one in the UK. There's weird places out here like Adams, Tennessee, that, the Bell Witch stuff, so it seems to be one of these areas where the
weird stuff
supernatural
happens.
kind of comes through.
Yeah. You know who died out there was actress Natalie Wood.
Yes, that's right.
And what's even weirder is that Christopher Walken was on that boat.
Yeah.
And he played Whitley Strieber.
Yes, he did. Yep.
In Communion.
Yeah.
So it's like synchronicity, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I became friends with a guy he's got a company called Horizon Boats, and he's a producer and director for Shark Week. And his company, they're the ones that you go to, like if you want to go dive with sharks and you want a cage, you go to this guy, and he puts you in a cage and drops you in the water with the great whites. He told me a lot of stories, not only that stuff that he's seen, but other captains of ships have told him. There's one story about a green door that was like some kind of portal opened up above the island, and it was just like a green doorway, and it was there for a few seconds, and then it was gone. And people have seen it a few times. There was one where there was a captain of a boat, and it was late at night, 4 a.m, and him and the first mate was in the galley, putting his head on the table, getting some rest. And he said that the inside of the boat lit up so brightly for like 3 seconds that it woke the guy up that had his head down. And he says to the captain, like, "Hey, Captain, what was that?" And the captain was like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. It happens all the time." Just crazy stuff.
Yeah, and that's another question too. Is like the Navy. You're not far from San Diego, so the Navy is right there, the bases and everything, and the Navy has probably encountered these things multiple times. Because
for sure,
wasn't the USS Nimitz and that fleet that was out there? I mean, they were doing exercises, so that's probably one of the places that they do their exercises a lot. And
it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
In a way, it's like, are the things out there because of the Navy? Is the Navy out there because of these things? It kind of makes you think.
Well, Kevin Day, he talked about how they confiscated some of the records, and I'm sure that's happened a ton, which that later on was, the Tic Tac video was the huge video, right? That's 2017 and when that really like blew wide open. So, I know that he kind of feels vindicated about all that, because they were trying to say that, I didn't know that he, was so affected by it. He seemed in the film, he gets very emotional.
He is, whenever he talks about it, he's very, very emotional. His life has just been turned upside down since this all came out, let alone the stress he was under before it came out. I can't even imagine,
So we've seen those videos, but there'd be a lot of other information that would have been recorded besides just those videos if they were in there.
Yeah, somebody allegedly came in a helicopter and took away, all that stuff.
It's like X-Files style.
But I've heard so many things. I've heard there's longer video of better quality. I've heard. I just don't know what to believe anymore. It's just such a big story. I do know. I've talked to Alex Dietrich. She's the only pilot. Well, I've talked to Ryan Graves briefly, and this is just all on social media, never in person. And they seem like they're pretty honest people. Like David Fravor, and Chad Underwood, the guy who actually filmed that stuff. They seem pretty credible to me, and I think that they would know what they're looking at. And also, just got to mention that the one video, the gimbal, I believe, was the one that was filmed on the East Coast, and that was during a different event with the Roosevelt. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's probably, like I said, I just think these portal areas, they are worldwide.
Yeah, it's another, I mean, in my opinion, you've got places like Skinwalker Ranch, you've got places like the Meadow, and then like Marley Woods, Sedona, was it Chapel Green? Well, no, I'm thinking of not Rendlesham, but there's another area. I forget the name of it. It'll come to me. But there's just different areas, and it's something like our friend Nathan talks about when he was looking at areas, when he looked at Somerset, Kentucky, and he took out that one map with the anomalies on it, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's all underneath here in Somerset." I think if you probably looked at that map and lined it up with reports of this kind of stuff, I bet you'd get something. I bet there'd be some connection.
Well, see, that would be the next step. I mean, are there any other places that you guys, if you're going to make a sequel to Terror in the Sky or something along that effect, is there any place that you guys would want to go and
there is, but I'm going to keep them to myself. Bless you.
Good idea.
I mean, obviously there's the more, I mean, I would love, I'll say a couple of suggestions. I would love to go out to someplace maybe like Chris Bledsoe's property, that's one I would like to go to. And, maybe even Sedona, I mean, there's people say, this, and it's true. This phenomena can happen anywhere, and it does. But there are certain spots where it happens more than others. It's just common knowledge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We'd like to see that too, and hopefully you guys can do some more of that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I'm ready to go. I mean, not for a film or a movie, but I'd love to go back out there knowing what I know now, like, and Dave probably feel the same way, knowing what we know now and bringing stuff that we didn't have the first time. You know what I mean? Like, if we went to Catalina and brought the equipment like they had at Laguna, who the heck knows what we would catch?
Right.
That's what I'd like to do.
What do you guys think about this? The congressional hearings that happened. Did you guys keep up with that? Just like this was only last week.
Yeah, so I watched them. I didn't go into it thinking we were going to have disclosure. I was probably blown away by the two things that most people were, and that was the Wilson documents and Maelstrom. Like the fact that those things were mentioned. It's kind of shocking. Like not the nuclear one, but the Wilson documents. Like I wasn't expecting that.
Fill us in on the Wilson documents.
So the Wilson documents are papers that were found in the collection of Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut. He passed away, and he was before he passed away, he was a member of NIDS and BASS. Like he worked with John Alexander, Kit Green, Hal Puthoff, Robert Bigelow, that whole crew, and Eric Davis. And these were notes that were written by Eric Davis, I guess, to go to Edgar Mitchell. He wasn't available to go one day. Eric Davis took notes, gave them to him. I think that's, if I remember correctly, but the notes were a meeting that Eric Davis had with an Admiral Wilson, and pretty much talking about a reverse engineering program by the government, talks of crash retrievals, stuff like that. And there's a big debate whether or not these were real notes or not. I mean, when it first happened, ufology was split in two: people that believed it, people that didn't. Just like everything else in ufology, you've got your debates about everything, but this was a big divider. There were certain people that really pushed it, and I know right now a lot of them feel vindicated that this was mentioned in that hearing, But it's like, was that mentioned on purpose to throw us off? Was it really mentioned? It's all these things go through your head when the U.S. government talks about this stuff, because you never know what to believe. It's another can of worms in your brain, just about.
Do you think that they're trying to throw this out to the public just as well, here you go, here's something to whet your appetite? I mean, it just seems like the military is really involved with this. And to me, that kind of, well, of course they would be, I guess, but there's some of it that just kind of makes me suspicious honestly.
There's a lot of it that makes me suspicious.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, are we dealing with some kind of like disinformation or?
Yeah, it's either like a continuation of Project Beta, that situation,
Sure.
where they're using the UFO phenomenon. You're welcome, Greg. That's another 5 cents you owe me. Where they're using the UFO phenomenon to cover up what they're working on. You know, not saying that there's not some type of phenomenon, but are they building on that to cover up what their technology? You know, from what I gather and from what I've kind of heard through the grapevine, you know, they don't know what this thing is. They know it's something, and that's why they're not coming out with it, is because they really don't know what's going on and they can't control it. And that's a problem.
Well, and it sounds like that a critical mass is happening with independent researchers too. And if you got guys like you out there capturing this stuff, if there's just too much of that, they have to kind of like be on the front of that.
Well, not really, because everything that they're presenting, especially like, you know, with the task force and this hearing, it's they're going along thinking, well, not thinking, but they're not talking about anything that happened before 2004. To them, this thing started with the Nimitz encounter, and they're only going with military testimony. They're not talking to the average guy who filmed something. They don't care about that.
Right,
You know
but they
what
want to shape that narrative, and they don't want it to be, you know, without their input.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And they put their spin on it. They, you know, it's like, are they using it to their advantage?
Weird stuff.
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's like the what do you call it? The immortal snake that just keeps eating its tail. You know, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it just keeps going, man.
Yeah, I mean, the whole disclosure thing, I just don't think that. I think people are like really hopeful, and you talked about this, Dave, that, you know, the new generation gets a hold of a lot of this stuff, and there's some of us that have been around for a long time with all this, and we're like, well, this has happened before, and it's going to happen.
This is
happen again, and you guys.
If you want to do something cool, if you want to do something cool, and you're following ufology today with all this, go back and listen to Art Bell from 1994 to 1998. And it's the same exact thing that's happening now happened then. And you can listen to it and you're going to be like, holy shit, man, this is exactly what's going on now.
And Art Bell was initially funded by Bigelow.
And not only that, I mean, we're talking the arts parts, the materials, all that stuff, man. I mean, that's a whole nother show, the stuff. I mean, you can go back and it's the Linda Moulton Howe talking about the metals, talking about arts, talking the magnesium, the bismuth, the whole thing, everything. Even you know, with people in the government, when the Phoenix Lights happened, they had all these people come on there, you know, and you know, that were like whistleblowers in a way, you know, and you thought then that was it. You know, every year on Art Bell shows in the 90s ends with disclosure. In January, it's disclosure episode. And it's the same people that you got now.
Right.
Because they've made a career out of it.
Yeah. They make a career out of, you know, I'm not going to name any names, but we all know.
Yeah. It's it just keeps going and going and going.
Here's one that you probably don't remember. I think it was 1997 was the 50th anniversary of Roswell. And they had a press conference. They had a big thing in Roswell at the museum, and they had the same thing they do every year, but it was a bigger one because it was the 50th. And there was a couple of people that were, you know, in ufology, with a couple of people that were mainstream scientists, with a couple people from Hollywood, and they were having a big press conference to announce that they had materials and that they were tested, and this is it. And we're going to be doing the press conference in about an hour. Well, the time came for the press conference, and guess what? It was canceled because the one scientist decided he didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't want to get his name out there. It's like the same things that are happening over and over again. It's like they keep bringing out the same bag of tricks, you know? And people, unfortunately, you know, like we were saying, people that are younger, that are just getting into this now, they don't know about all that stuff. because they're not looking into cases. Like my biggest thing to research is anything that happened pretty much before the 80s, like the contactee movement. I love all that stuff. I love all those cases from back then, the crazy wacky stuff, like the humanoid cases and all the landing cases. That's what I love looking into. And some of these people never even heard of it. Yeah, like Albert Rosales, like that's the kind of stuff I'm into, like, and people don't know about that stuff, and it blows my mind. Here's another one. Wait, real quick, while I'm thinking. So George Knapp went to Russia in the 90s, came back with materials. Where's that? What happened to that?
Yeah.
All we heard was he was talking to Art Bell. I'm in Russia. I'm coming back. I've got materials from a craft. That was the last I ever heard of it. Last ever heard of it.
Got the stuff.
I got the meta materials, man.
Yeah, I got the meta, man.
I'm curious, David Mason, how you feel about some of this. Like, I mean, we were talking earlier, just about that there might be a much less physical explanation for all this, and I really think that's why it just cannot be pinned down, and it's going to just remain anomalous. I mean, do you have any thoughts on these congressional hearings and like the disclosure movement and any of that material?
On the congressional hearings, I watched it. I finally watched it. And the only positive I would get out of it is that it was actually given credence where there was a hearing about the subject. But it was really shrouded in a lot of obfuscation, a lot of attention to details that really weren't even important details. And then, of course, playing a video of the triangle video of night vision, which we all pretty much know was a defocused night vision device where the field stop was creating a triangular shape. And I thought that was kind of suspicious, even when that video was released, that maybe that was released for the purpose so that it could be debunked later and say, see, fellas, that's what you guys are all seeing is this kind of stuff. And they didn't get to the meat of it. That part was very disappointing. Or when they were asked about the missile base being shut down, and the people that are supposedly the authority on the phenomenon had no knowledge of it, as they claimed. That is very disappointing, and so I wasn't impressed by anybody's level of performance, or I should say, even the questions that were asked amongst themselves. I didn't really think that they were at a real level of integrity, but rather more of a public display to try to satisfy and say, see, here's what we got. This is what we did.
The real stuff came out in the back room afterwards.
Yeah, and then they announced that they're gonna do a continuation behind closed doors. Well, we all would like to be the fly on the wall.
It's like we know that they've got better video than they showed of this thing that looks like a garbage bag or something floating outside of a plane. You're telling me, I mean, the Nimitz videos, that stuff was better than that.
They don't even want to cover that, and I guarantee you, the guys even discussing it probably have no experience reviewing videos and doing the proper analysis on a video, vetting it and determining whether or not it's a hoax or whether if it's a real phenomenon or some sort of a camera aberration. So I would say disappointing from most aspects. The only positive is the fact that there was a hearing, but it was it was pretty much garbage for everybody who watched it. It was pretty hard to watch.
Well, gentlemen, this has been awesome. My last real question, and I really have to know, is like, how did you get William Shatner? How'd you get Captain Kirk himself?
Yeah, there's quite a few high-profile cameos.
Yeah,
believe it or not, it wasn't me.
As well.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't me. It was
I mean, what was it? I mean, what was it like meeting TJ Hooker?
I actually already knew him. I knew him from when I was working in my Comic-Con days. I've known the guy for a long time. I didn't get to talk to him, or it's funny, I've worked with him in the past. I worked on his TV show, and I'm in a movie with him, and he probably has no idea.
What TV show was that? Was that the?
I work occasionally. I work on the
You have to
Unexplained.
be specific about which TV show William Shatner
The
was
William,
in.
the William, yeah, the new one he's on now, The Unexplained.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
I was
friends
like,
that are
Dave,
producers.
were you in Star Trek? I didn't know.
No. Yeah, I have friends that are producers on the show, and they call me occasionally for some advice or.
He was a
some
Romulan.
casting.
They put a bunch of
Yes, live long and
prosthetics on his
prosper.
face.
Yeah. But yeah, Dave. Dave. I think it was Dave and two other guys were able to meet him. I'll let Dave tell you that story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
meeting Shatner. I mean, the Shat himself.
Got to meet him at the studio. So by the time I got to meet him, he was already running late in his schedule. So I only got to speak a few words, and it was a bit overwhelming to see this guy that I'd seen since I was like 4 years old and understanding him and watching the show. I remember when I was 4 watching the show, I thought it was really happening, that this was a spaceship flying around and these guys were going all over the place. And I think it was when I was 5, I figured out it was a TV series.
You really believe those women were green?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I even believed all the machines and the aliens and the things were happening. I just thought that, and in those days when I'd watch a Western and a guy got shot, I thought they killed the guy for the show. I mean, that's just what you did. And so, I think by the time I was 5, I figured things out. But yeah, it was really very overwhelming to meet the guy and speak a few words, but he had to leave the studio when I had my chance just to have a few moments.
Busy guy.
Yeah, he was a very busy guy, but it was exciting.
He was going into space.
Yeah, shortly thereafter he went to space.
God, I mean, he's what? He's
90
something, right?
He's 90.
I'm actually friends with Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov.
Yeah,
I've worked with him before, and I'm actually working on a project right now with some of the cast from Star Trek Voyager for some TV stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool to mix the reality with the fiction.
But the fiction, I think, is what triggers it all, because if
it wasn't for that,
if it wasn't for the original Star Trek, we wouldn't have many of the scientists that we have today. When you look at what Steve Jobs had said and people like that were inspired by it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, well, absolutely.
If it wasn't for Star Wars, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Well, I mean, Star Trek is what gives us, like the cell phone. I mean, smartphones. I mean, you basically see like the idea came from Star Trek and all that.
Yeah, the science fiction gives us it puts a goal. It's like, here's somebody saying, this is what we have. It's a muse. Yeah. Come on, here it is. Let's do it. So you put it out there and you make it a goal. So when the younger generation see it, they say, I'm going to start a company and build that device or make something that's along those lines. And look what it's got us today. It has been very inspirational. So that even the people that are in science fiction, I think they're equally as important as scientists as amongst real scientists.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Dave.
I was just saying real quick, I like blowing people's minds that don't know much about Roddenberry and Star Trek, and I started telling them the story of Gene Roddenberry and the Nine. Like how the Nine happened, and allegedly that Roddenberry was at some of those seances or whatever they were doing, those channeling sessions, and that's where he got some of his ideas for this stuff.
Well, we talk to Gulius about that, though.
Yeah,
ask him, because he did a great episode about the Nine, and
I've heard them all.
Yeah.
I think we need a little more Star Trek and a little less William Gibson cyberpunk dystopias.
I mean, I watched, just going off on a tangent here. I mean, the new series is great, Strange New Worlds.
Oh, I love
3 episodes, and
I watched them all. Yeah.
So far, I mean, it's just like watching the original series.
Yeah, it's crazy the way they did that.
Mm-hmm. Which that's based off of the original, the original pilot that they did.
Mm-hmm. And then they brought him back for Discovery.
Yeah. So that actor, but the
original
original Star Trek pilot was was Jeffrey Hunter,
right?
And then they said that one was too like cerebral, so they redid it with Shatner and a whole other cast. So I got a little bit of the Star Trek geekery in me. So
hey, we all do.
It's funny. I got to mention that when years ago, I was invited to a Mensa Society meeting, and sat in this session, and they were all talking about Star Trek trivia. And then somebody asked this question, and it was the only question that I could answer because I was big in Star Trek, but not really insane. But there was just one particular thing I remembered. And the trivia question was, how many tribbles were on the space station K7 when Spock announced his assessment in that episode of Troubles with Tribbles? And I raised my hand and said 1,771,561. And the guy says, "You're right." And everybody turned at me and looked at me like I was one of them. And and the funny thing was, if they asked me any other question, I wouldn't have known the answer. But it was something that stuck in my head as a kid.
Did you just remember it from the show?
Yeah, it was just something I remembered it because it was when I was a kid. The Troubles with Tribbles was my favorite show, favorite episode, and I always was.
I'd have nightmares that Tribbles were actually turned into Borg, and there was Borg Tribbles.
Well, you know what gave me nightmares as a kid? It was the Doomsday Machine. It looked like that giant stone ice cream cone in space that was eating spaceships. That thing scared me. And then the one that had it was that thing that had the dummy on it. It had the weird head. I call it the bean head as a kid. And it had the guy Clint Howard. Clint Howard was in it, and he played a little. That episode, but that dummy it scared me, And then of course the Horde, the big pizza thing that was eating tunnels in the mines of the rock. That stuff, it kind of lingers.
I don't know, David. It sounds like you were pretty into that show.
The one that freaked me out when I was a kid was the one where they were on that planet with like. It was all children on the planet.
Yeah, and they had the weird faces.
They reached a certain age, they started getting like this weird leprosy. I mean,
the other one was the beings with the big heads with the veins in it.
Yeah, that's from the original pilot.
Yeah,
it had like the pulsing and stuff.
Yeah,
South Park did a lot of just made fun of a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah,
but like my favorite one was the one where they had Frank Gorshin, the guy who played the Riddler.
The Riddler, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he had like, the black on one side, the white on the other. They get him and they have the other guy that comes on the ship and he's got the same thing, but it's reversed. And so they're trying to kill each other because they're the only ones left of their whole planet. And so it was like this message about racism and racial struggle, and they could get away with a lot of cool stuff like that. The messages.
Oh, back then, yeah, it was like exploitation almost.
Yeah, they had to put it in there. It was like Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone did the same kind of stuff.
The one where he fights, what is it? The Gore, whatever, the giant lizard
Gorn.
guy.
Yeah, the Gorn.
Yeah, so that where they filmed that is in Topanga Canyon, and if you pay attention to a lot of movies, like example, Bill and Ted, Excellent Adventure, like where they die. No, the second one where they die, they fall off.
Bogus
Journey. They actually fall off of that cliff, and the whole scene is shot in front of that rock. And I've seen so many movies that I can be like, oh, that's where they shot that scene, and they used it in a lot of movies.
It's used in a lot of westerns of the same thing.
Yeah.
There was a really good episode of Star Trek that had Robert Lansing, and it was Assignment Earth, where he's kind of like, Robert Lansing is almost like a James Bond, and he's time traveled to the past because he's trying to stop a nuclear weapon, and has Terry Garr, and that was a really good episode.
That was supposed to.
Those are my favorite ones.
That was supposed to have been its own series.
Yeah, it almost developed out. And, Robert Lansing.
All really the ones where Spock's human and he wears a hat to cover up his ears. Those are the good ones.
Yeah, that one was trying to remember her name.
And they're in jail. They go to jail.
Yeah, and there's one where Captain Kirk falls in love and Edith Keeler is supposed to die, and they're time traveled, and that was a pretty good episode.
City on the Edge of Forever.
That's I didn't know the name. Yeah. And then the Piece of the Action. Yeah, that was a fun one. The Western one.
I think City on the Edge of Forever might have been Richard Matheson. I think that might have been the one he wrote. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, there was one episode I didn't like, and it was one with Marjo Gortner was in it, and maybe that was the reason.
Marjo Gortner was in Star Trek.
Yeah, he was in one of these. It had like these hippie guys, and I can't remember what they did. I usually just tune it out, but pretty much every episode was done very well. I mean, everybody did their role, did them well, And Spock was just the pinnacle of the coolest of aliens ever, period. I mean, just the coolest of cool.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this. Dave Altman, please tell us where we can find the film and where people can find you.
So the film is on Amazon, Vimeo, or you can go to our site, which is atearinthesky.com. And I can be found on Facebook, David H. Altman, and on Twitter at David H. Altman, and Instagram, David H. Altman.
And David Mason, where can people see some of the stuff that you've been doing?
I have my own Facebook page. It's just David Mason. And then I have a YouTube channel, which is also just David Mason. There's probably a few David Masons. If you see the name, you'll see my head, and I'm wearing some flight gear. Or because I was flying an airplane.
And if you're into this stuff, you'll have mutual friends.
Right.
All right, gentlemen, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to close out the show, but please stay on the line for us. So, guys, if you are interested in seeing this film, Terror in the Sky, we highly recommend it. And as you guys should know by now, you can find us, Conspirinormal.com, Conspirinormal Podcast YouTube channel. And we also have a Patreon that you can join up. And every month we've been doing these Strange Realities online events. Strange Realities, of course, is our other entity in our conference, which is actually coming up October 14th through the 16th here in Nashville, Tennessee. We're hoping that you guys will come out for that, and Sergio can tell you where you can find our Patreon.
You can find that at patreon.com/Conspirinormal.
And I would like to say too, like these interruptions to our podcast feed keep happening with these two guys. I complained bitterly to the podcast hosting site and for this to stop, but these guys have been really like, I don't know. It might happen on this episode. It may have already happened. So if you guys keep hearing this, like Shelby and Orvis or whoever the hell these people are, just, why don't you report that? Because these guys are really like, cutting into our Patreon money and getting a little mad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And whatever they say, isn't true. And they say supposedly, they have informants on the inside of our Patreon. So, you guys did take very serious blood oaths of the information we parted. We really hope that you're not just sharing that all willy-nilly with some conspiracy-obsessed hillbillies.
Yeah, we'd hate for you to end up like William Morgan.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, that's it for now. Join us next time on
Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.